They say blood is thicker than water, but sometimes it is only thicker with lies and entitlement. I learned that the hard way. I worked 2 jobs, 7 days a week, to help my sister finish her degree. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought family meant supporting each other, even when it was difficult. But the night she called me a loser, in front of her new, wealthy in-laws, something in me broke. That was the moment I decided I was done letting her use me. If she wanted her new life so badly, she could pay for it herself. Let me tell you how everything started. My name is Tessa, and I'm a 29-year-old master plumber. My days are filled with fixing leaks, installing pipes, crawling under sinks, and dealing with clogged drains. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work. It paid for my small but comfortable house. It paid off my SUV. It kept me out of debt. I worked for every dollar I have. My sister, Jocelyn, is 26. She was always the golden child. Pretty, bright, charming, and spoiled without even knowing it. Growing up, everything was about what Jocelyn wanted. When it came time for college, my parents opened the Jocelyn Fund without hesitation. But when it came to me, there was nothing. No savings, no plan, no money. I accepted it and went to trade school while she went to a private university to study fashion merchandising. But the money for her didn't last. When her fund ran dry, my parents came to me. They guilt-tripped me so hard that I gave in. They told me, "She'll lose her future if you don't help. And you have a stable job, Tessa. You can afford to support her for a little while." A little while turned into 3 years. I drained my savings dollar by dollar until I had paid a total of $45,000 for her tuition, books, housing, and everything else she needed. And after all that, all I got was a short text message. "You saved my life, Tess." Hugs and kisses. No visit. No thank you dinner. Not even a phone call. But I kept going because I believed family was worth the sacrifice. I thought I was building her future. Then came her engagement dinner. Her fiancé, Thad, came from old money, and his parents were the type who wore their wealth like a badge. I already felt out of place, but I smiled through it. And then Jocelyn looked at me, then at them, and said she was embarrassed to introduce her plumber sister. She called me a loser to the people I had struggled so hard to help her impress. That was the last day I let her use me. That was the day I understood that blood may be thicker, but some family ties are only held together with manipulation and greed. And I decided I wasn't going to hold them up anymore. After Jocelyn graduated, nothing really changed. She kept talking about her dream job, but she never stayed anywhere for long. She moved from one idea to another, always saying something better was coming. While she drifted, our parents kept paying for most of her lifestyle. They didn't complain, and she didn't see anything wrong with it. Then she met Thad. He came from old money and carried himself like someone who thought he was above everyone else. He worked as a commercial real estate broker and always wore a polite smile that felt more like judgment than kindness. Jocelyn fell for him fast. Soon, they were showing off their relationship everywhere, and before long, they were engaged. Their engagement party was big and fancy. My parents, Marcia and Ron, acted like they had won something. They were proud to be connected to Thad's wealthy family. They loved how people looked at them with admiration, as if Jocelyn marrying into money made them important too. After the engagement, Jocelyn and Thad moved into a high-end apartment. It was the kind of place with tall windows, expensive furniture, and rent that made my stomach twist just hearing the number. At first, everything seemed perfect, but it wasn't long before Thad became tired of paying for most of their bills. Jocelyn didn't make enough to cover her share, and he didn't want to keep carrying the weight alone. The pressure grew, and my parents started to panic. They didn't want Jocelyn losing her fancy new life. And when they panic, they always look in one direction, me. They called with worried voices, telling me Jocelyn needed help. They said Thad was unhappy about the money issue, and they didn't want the engagement to fall apart. The solution they offered was the same solution they always offered. I should step in and pay. They acted like it was the obvious answer, like I was supposed to keep fixing every problem Jocelyn created. They didn't ask if I could afford it or if I wanted to. They simply expected me to do it because I always had before. That was how the pressure started again. Same pattern, same demands, same feeling that my life and hard work didn't matter as much as keeping Jocelyn's world comfortable. And all I could think was how quickly her dreams disappeared the moment someone else's money stopped flowing. My mom called me one evening, and the moment I heard her voice, I knew something was coming. She sounded worried, but it didn't feel real. It was the same tone she always used when she wanted something from me. She said, "Tessa, Jocelyn is in a spot. Thad is being so difficult about money. Could you just cover her part of the rent? It's only $1,400. I felt a cold anger rise in me. I had heard this kind of request too many times. I took a slow breath and said, "Mom, I gave her $45,000. I am not her landlord." My voice was calm, but inside I felt tired. Tired of being used. Tired of being the automatic solution for everything. Mom didn't want to hear that. She jumped straight into the same lines she always used. "She's your sister," she said, as if that erased everything. As if family meant I had to keep giving until I had nothing left. I answered, "And I've already paid for her future." I meant it. I had already carried her more than enough. But she kept going, repeating the same things, trying to make me feel guilty. It was like hearing a broken record. She talked about Jocelyn being stressed. She talked about Thad not wanting to argue. She talked about how she and Dad didn't want the engagement falling apart over something like money. Every excuse pointed back to me, like I was the only person who could fix it. For the first time, I didn't bend. I didn't try to make it easy. I didn't rush to save the day. I stayed firm. I told her no again and again, even when her tone changed from pleading to annoyed. By the end of the call, she sounded frustrated, and I felt drained, but I didn't give in. When the call ended, I thought that was it. I thought I finally won the fight. I believed they would accept my decision. But I was naive. They didn't let go, they just stopped asking me directly. Somehow, they managed to pull money together without me. I don't know if they borrowed it, stretched themselves thin, or convinced someone else to help. All I knew was that Jocelyn didn't lose the apartment. After that, everything went quiet. Not peaceful quiet, tense quiet. No one in the family brought the topic up again. They acted normal on the surface, but I could feel the shift. Conversations felt stiff. Calls were shorter. Messages were fewer. It was like everyone was avoiding anything that might make the truth come out again. The months before the wedding felt heavy. No one said it out loud, but I could feel the blame sitting on me, even though I had done more for Jocelyn than anyone else. I kept my distance and focused on my work, but the silence followed me everywhere. And even though nothing explosive happened yet, I knew something had changed forever. The wedding took place inside a modern art museum, a place filled with bright lights, tall ceilings, and colorful paintings. Everywhere I looked, people were dressed in expensive clothes that made the whole event feel like a fashion show. The guests moved around with confidence, laughing softly, holding glasses of champagne, and acting like they belonged in that world. I wore the best outfit I owned, a well-tailored pantsuit I had bought for an industry conference months earlier. It fit me well and made me feel neat and professional. But as soon as I stepped into the room, I felt how different I looked from everyone else. The women around me wore long designer gowns, sparkling jewelry, and shoes that cost more than my monthly utilities. The men wore custom suits and carried themselves like they were used to luxury. I tried to stay focused and calm. I kept reminding myself that my outfit was clean, presentable, and chosen with care. But as the minutes passed, I began to notice the glances. They were small, quick, and meant to be polite, but I saw them. Some of Thad's relatives looked at me with smiles that never reached their eyes. They nodded in greeting, but then looked me up and down, as if trying to place me or judge where I fit. Their politeness felt thin, like a sheet of plastic covering something sharper underneath. They spoke to me with the kind of tone people use when they're trying to be proper, but are uncomfortable. A few complimented my outfit, but their voices carried a softness that sounded more like pity than praise. I could feel the difference between them and me in every small moment. When I walked past groups of guests, their conversations paused just long enough to make me wonder if they were discussing me. When I stood near the tables, a few people shifted slightly, as if keeping a polite distance. Even the servers, trained to be professional, seemed to glance longer than usual, trying to figure out who I was in this sea of wealth. I kept my shoulders straight and my head high, even though it took effort. I didn't want to show that their judgment bothered me. I didn't want them to see how out of place I felt. I moved through the museum quietly, taking in the artwork on the walls and trying to stay away from the center of attention. The whole time, I couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider. I stood there, surrounded by people who valued status and appearance more than character, and I felt like they had already decided who I was before I even opened my mouth. Their eyes told me everything. They didn't see me as equal. And though no one said a rude word aloud, Their looks were enough to make the night feel heavy. I needed a break from the crowd. The whole room felt heavy with fake smiles and shallow conversations. So I quietly stepped away and walked toward a small balcony tucked behind a set of glass doors. The air outside was cool, and for the first time that evening, I felt like I could breathe. I thought I was alone, but when I moved closer to the railing, I noticed voices coming from the corner. There they were, Jocelyn, Thad, and his parents, Celeste and Winston. They stood in a small circle, holding their drinks and talking in low, relaxed tones. I stayed still, hidden by a piece of wall, not ready to walk over and join them. Celeste spoke first. Her voice was soft but carried a hint of judgment. She said she had met me earlier and asked, "Tessa is the one in home maintenance?" The pause in her sentence was enough to show what she really thought. She didn't know the right word, or maybe she didn't care enough to remember. Jocelyn responded before anyone else could. She let out a light, delicate laugh, the kind she used when she wanted to sound sweet, but ended up sounding cruel. "She's a plumber," she said. Then she added, "I love her, but let's be honest, she's kind of a loser." The words hit me like a cold wind. She kept talking. No ambition beyond fixing toilets. I was mortified introducing her. "Everyone here is a gallery owner or a director, and my sister is the person you call when your sink is backed up." She laughed again, as if her own words were entertaining. Thad didn't say anything. He just sipped his drink and looked away, like he agreed but didn't want to say it out loud. His parents gave small, understanding smiles, the kind people give when they think something rude is true. I stood frozen. I had worked 2 jobs for years to put Jocelyn through college. I had given her everything I had. And she stood there, telling people I was an embarrassment. Hearing her speak like that felt like watching a mask fall off. The sister I thought I had, the one I had helped, supported, and protected, was gone. Or maybe she was never really there. Maybe this was who she had always been, and I just didn't want to see it. I didn't step forward or confront them. I didn't move at all. I stayed in the shadows, letting each word settle inside me like a stone. I realized in that moment that the fakeness inside the museum was nothing compared to the fakeness coming from my own sister. And standing there unseen, I understood something clearly. Whatever came next, I was done being the person she could shame, use, or belittle. The moment I heard Jocelyn call me a loser, something inside me shut down. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, like a small light going out. That one word did not just hurt my feelings. It ended whatever sense of duty I still felt toward her. I stood there in the shadows unseen, while she told Thad and his parents that I had no ambition and that I embarrassed her. Every sentence she spoke felt like a reminder of everything I had done for her. As she kept talking, I felt the weight of all the sacrifices I had made. I remembered every early morning when I dragged myself out of bed for my first job. I remembered the nights I worked late, covered in dirt and sweat, trying to save enough to support her dreams. I remembered writing checks for her tuition while ignoring things I wanted for myself. I remembered handing over money I had worked so hard to earn, telling myself it was worth it because she was my sister. But in that moment, listening to her laugh and talk about me like I was nothing, those memories no longer felt like love. They felt like mistakes. Big, painful mistakes. I did not scream or shout. I did not step forward and demand she stop talking. I did not even let a tear fall. Instead, my whole body went still. It was like my heart had finally given up trying to explain or excuse her behavior. The hurt was deep, but the calm that followed was even deeper. It was as if every emotion inside me froze at once. I could still hear their voices behind me, low, smooth, and full of judgment, but I no longer cared about their opinions. Something had changed inside me. I no longer felt tied to Jocelyn by love or loyalty. The idea that I owed her anything disappeared completely. Without making a sound, I turned and walked away from the balcony. With each step, my mind grew clearer. I didn't think about the crowd inside the museum, or the fancy decorations, or the music playing in the background. I only thought about what needed to happen next. My steps felt steady, controlled. I wasn't rushing, and I wasn't shaking. I felt colder, calmer than I had ever felt before. It was not anger. It was clarity, sharp, clean, and final. As I moved farther away from the balcony, my future actions formed in my mind one by one. I knew what I would do when the wedding was over. I knew what I would stop giving. I knew what I would no longer tolerate. And most of all, I knew that Jocelyn would never again have the power to use me or make me feel small. By the time I reached the other side of the museum, the decision was fully formed. My life from this point on would be different. It would be mine, not shaped by guilt or expectation. That icy calm didn't fade. It settled in my chest, firm and steady, guiding every step I took after that night. The next morning, I woke up feeling different. The hurt from the night before had settled into something sharper: determination. I was no longer just upset or disappointed. I was ready to act, and for the first time in years, I felt in control. Months ago, when the pressure had been unbearable, I had reluctantly set up an automatic rent payment for Jocelyn. It was meant to be a one-time thing, emergency help only. I didn't want to, but my parents had made it sound urgent, like if I didn't step in, she would lose everything. I had agreed, even though it went against everything I had learned about standing up for myself. The payment was scheduled to go through in just 3 days, and I realized I still had time to stop it. I logged into my bank account and stared at the numbers on the screen. My hand hovered over the cancel button. I thought about all the work I had done, all the hours I had spent, all the money I had given her. Every back-breaking day, every dollar sacrificed, led to this moment. I pressed cancel, and a small but satisfying sense of power surged through me. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't helpless. I wasn't just the sister who gave everything and got nothing in return. I was taking control of my own life. With that done, I opened my email. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't hesitate. I knew what I had to say. I had been calm and quiet the night before, listening to Jocelyn mock me, and now it was time to act. It wasn't about revenge in the loud, dramatic sense. It was about making a choice and standing by it. The words I typed were clear and deliberate. There was no emotion, no pleading, no guilt. Just facts and consequences. I let them know that the automatic payment had been canceled and that Jocelyn would be responsible for her own expenses from now on. I sent it to Thad's parents first. I wanted them to know exactly what had happened and why. It was professional, but firm, and I felt the weight of every decision I had made reflected in each sentence. After sending the email, I leaned back in my chair and took a deep breath. The pain and frustration of the past months were still there, but they were sharper now, focused into resolve. I wasn't angry in a chaotic way anymore. I wasn't sad or disappointed. I was ready to move forward, and nothing, no guilt, no family pressure, no more of Jocelyn's mockery, would make me step back. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had taken back control. The calm inside me was different now. It was quiet but powerful. I knew the storm would come, but I was prepared, and I would face it on my terms. This was my moment, my decision, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it away. I opened my laptop and began typing the first email. It was meant for Celeste and Winston, Thad's parents. I knew it had to be clear and professional. There was no room for emotion, no anger or pleading, just facts. I started the email with a polite greeting. "Dear Celeste and Winston," I typed. Then I got straight to the point. I explained that a financial arrangement involving Jocelyn had ended. I told them that I would no longer be sending the $1,400 monthly payment for her share of the rent. I didn't try to soften the message or make excuses. I wanted them to understand clearly that this was my decision, and it was final. I included the reason. I explained that the night before, I had overheard Jocelyn call me a loser and an embarrassment to their family. That comment had changed everything. I made it clear that my actions were a direct result of her words. I didn't add extra details or arguments. I kept it factual, precise, and firm. Then I confirmed the final payment had been canceled. I attached the bank transfer confirmation for the previous month, so they could see everything was real and official. There was no room for misunderstanding. Every word was deliberate, every sentence mattered. Before hitting send, I paused and read it over. It was short, simple, and clear. No emotion, no judgment, no bitterness. Just the truth, delivered professionally. I wanted them to know exactly what had happened, why it had happened, and that from now on, Jocelyn would be responsible for her own financial obligations. I pressed send and leaned back. A strange calm washed over me. I had taken the first step. I had set boundaries, and I had done it without yelling, crying, or begging. It felt empowering to act decisively and professionally, instead of letting anger or hurt control me. After the email went out, I sat quietly for a moment, thinking about what would come next. I knew the consequences would follow quickly. Jocelyn would no longer have her rent covered, and Thad's parents would be aware of the truth. But I also knew that I had done the right thing. I had acted firmly and with integrity, standing up for myself for the first time in years. That email marked a turning point. It was the start of taking control, of ending the pattern that had drained me for so long. It was quiet but powerful. And for the first time in a long time, I felt completely in charge of my own life. The next email was for my parents and Jocelyn. It had to be clear, firm, and direct. There was no need for emotion or explanations. Everything had to be simple and precise. It began with a straightforward greeting. Mom, Dad, Jocelyn. Then the message went straight to the point. The subsidies were over, and the rent payment had been stopped. There would be no more financial help, and that was final. The tuition money came next. Repayment of the $45,000 I had given for Jocelyn's college education was formally demanded. A clear deadline was set. 30 days to provide a formal repayment plan. This ensured everything would be official and documented. There could be no misunderstanding about the expectations. Thad's parents were already informed that Jocelyn would now be responsible for her own financial obligations. There was no need to go into more detail. The message was simple. She could no longer rely on anyone else, and I would no longer carry the burden of her life. A final note explained the reason for this decision. Jocelyn's cruel words the night before had led to this reality. It was stated as a fact calmly and clearly, without anger or drama. Her honesty about how she viewed me made it impossible to continue supporting her as before. Every sentence was short and factual. There were no long explanations, no pleading, and no emotional appeals. The decision was serious, final, and undeniable. After sending it, a mix of relief and satisfaction settled in. Years of giving, sacrificing, and being taken for granted had led to this moment. Boundaries were finally drawn, and the position was clear in writing, professional, and firm. There was no fear of reactions, guilt trips, or angry calls. The laptop was closed and the phone set aside. Sitting quietly, the calm from taking control was strong. The next days might bring questions, anger, or shock from parents and Jocelyn, but the choice had been made. For the first time in years, life felt fully my own. Standing firm and setting limits brought a sense of power. After years of being used, it was clear that the future would be different. No one could manipulate or belittle me anymore. Decisions would now be mine, and responsibility would finally be shared where it belonged. The silence afterward was comforting. It marked the end of a long pattern of giving without respect. From that moment on, I could focus on my own life, my own work, and my own peace, knowing I had acted decisively and stood up for myself when it mattered most. The day after sending the emails was completely quiet. No phone calls, no messages, no one showing up at my door. The silence felt heavier than any apology could have been, but also strangely satisfying. It was as if the world had paused, giving me a moment to breathe without guilt or demands. I went to work, focusing on what I knew best. There was a new build I had been called to for a complicated plumbing problem. Pipes had been misaligned, fittings were tight, and the system threatened to flood if not handled correctly. I worked methodically, taking each step carefully, and by the end of the day, everything flowed perfectly. The satisfaction of a job done right on my own terms was a comfort I hadn't felt in years. When I returned home, I stepped into my quiet house. It was paid off, small but solid, and it felt like mine in every sense. I looked around at the space I had built through hard work and sacrifice, and for the first time in a long time, it felt truly peaceful. The first of the month was still a week away, but I knew the consequences of my actions were coming. I understood the silence for what it was, the calm before the storm. Jocelyn and Thad would soon realize the rent wasn't being covered. My parents would have to answer questions from Thad's family. The image they had of Jocelyn as the perfect, golden child was about to shatter, and the truth I had delivered would hit hard. I could almost hear the chaos building, even though it hadn't arrived yet. And for the first time, I felt safe. Safe in my home, safe in my work, safe in the knowledge that I had done what needed to be done. I had set boundaries, taken control, and refused to be used anymore. The storm would rage, and I would watch it unfold without fear or guilt. I knew it wouldn't be easy for them. They had built a world dependent on my help, on my sacrifice, and now that foundation was gone. The coming days would test everyone, but I was ready. I had my calm, my quiet, and my independence. For the first time in years, I could truly breathe. I was free from the weight of their expectations, and the silence around me was proof that I had finally reclaimed my life. The storm would come, but I would remain untouched, standing strong in the life I had earned. Do you think Tessa made the right choice by stepping away from her family and finally protecting her peace? Or do you feel she should have given them one more chance? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. I would really love to hear your opinion. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new one.